workers at Amazon in Staten Island, New York, who for the very first time were able to win a union organizing campaign against that giant corporation, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, the second wealthiest person in America. Amazon spent over $4 million in trying to defeat the union organizing drive in Staten Island and in Bessemer. The independent union, the Amazon Labor Union, had almost no money at all for their grassroots campaign, but ended up with 55% of the vote. Congratulations, Amazon Labor Union, for your extraordinary and important victory. Madam President, I also want to congratulate the workers at Starbucks for their incredible union organizing efforts. Starbucks has coffee shops in some 15,000 locations all across America. And until a few months ago, none of them were organized. Then in December, workers in 2 shops in Buffalo, New York, voted to join a union, and that union organizing effort at Starbucks is spreading like wildfire all across the country. In fact, last Friday, workers in New York City successfully voted to form the first Starbucks union roastery and 10th union Starbucks coffee shop in the country. And in the coming weeks and months, Starbucks workers in some 170 other coffee shops in 27 states will be holding union elections. What makes these union victories so impressive is that from start to finish, they were accomplished by a grassroots movement with very little financial resources. Now, why is it important that we support these union organizing efforts at Starbucks and in other companies throughout the country? And the answer is pretty simple. We live in a time of massive income and wealth inequality, where CEOs make 350 times more than the average worker, where two people own more wealth than the bottom 42% of Americans. We live at a time where the billionaire class is becoming much, much wealthier, while real weekly wages for American workers are $40 lower today than they were 49 years ago. In fact, we're seeing more income and wealth disparity now than we have seen in 100 years. And what we are witnessing is a massive, massive transfer of wealth from working families and the middle class to the top 1%. People on top doing phenomenally well, while millions and millions of working class families are falling behind. And that has been going on for almost 50 years. Madam President, according to the Rand Institute, since 1975, $50 trillion in wealth has been redistributed from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. Now, I know we don't talk about it too much in corporate media. We don't talk about it too much on the floor of the Senate. But that is an astounding reality. And that is a reality that we have got to address. Not acceptable that since 1975, $50 trillion in wealth has been redistributed from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. And listen to this, which really says it all. during this terrible pandemic, where we have lost almost 1 million American lives, when thousands of essential workers died, people going to work would have no choice about it. During that entire period, some 700 billionaires in America became nearly $2 trillion richer. Today, multi-billionaires like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson are off taking joyrides on rocket ships to outer space, buying $500 million super yachts and living in mansions with 25 bathrooms. That's what's going on for the people on top. But for working families, there is a continuous struggle to pay the rent, to provide health care, and to make sure their kids are able to get a decent education. And let us be very clear. It is not just income and wealth inequality that we are talking about. It is economic and political power. 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 In America today, just 3 Wall Street firms, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, control assets of over $21 trillion, which is essentially the GDP of the United States, the largest economy on earth. Can you imagine that? Now, I know we don't talk about it, but you got 3 Wall Street firms that control assets equivalent to the GDP of the United States, the largest economy on earth. That's power. And these firms have power over hundreds and hundreds of corporations in every sector of our society and many millions of workers. So why do we want to see the trade union movement grow? Why do we want to see more and more workers entitled to negotiate decent contracts? And the answer is pretty obvious. And it is because unions provide better wages, benefits, and working conditions for their members. That is what unions do, not complicated. In fact, union workers make, on average, wages that are about 20% higher than their non-union counterparts. They also have much better health care benefits and far better pension plans than non-union employees. That is why it makes sense to join a union and why it makes sense for us to do everything that we can to grow the trade union movement in this country. And I know there are some folks out there who are not union members, and they're saying, well, it doesn't really impact me. You're wrong. It does. Because when unions gain better wages and better benefits, it means that companies in the non-union sector have got to begin, to some degree, to match them. So when wages go up for union workers, they go up for all workers in this country. Further, Madam President, unions give workers some degree of control over their work lives and make them more than just cogs in a machine. Today, millions and millions of people go to work. They have no power whatsoever about what happens to them on the job. They can be fired arbitrarily. They can learn that they have to come to work the next day when they thought they had that day off, and they have no say in any of that. And so what unions do is end the ability of companies being able to arbitrarily fire workers for any reason and to impose any schedule that they want on their employees. In other words, unions give workers some degree of control over their work lives. Similarly, when large corporations have enormous political power through the many billions of dollars they spend on lobbying, on campaign contributions to both political parties, and on advertising, unions have the capability, because they have many millions and millions of people involved, to fight back and create a legislative agenda here in Washington and in state capitals that work for all Americans and not just the few. Now, Madam President, what these recent union victories tell me is that working people all over this country are sick and tired of being exploited by corporations who today are making record-breaking profits. They are sick and tired of billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, becoming obscenely richer during the pandemic, while they, the workers, put their lives on the line working for inadequate wages, inadequate benefits, and unfair working conditions and schedules. And let us be clear. If you think that the union victories, recent victories at Amazon and Starbucks are an aberration, you would be sorely mistaken. During the last year, I have been proud to work with and stand in solidarity with courageous workers all across this country who have been on strike or who are engaged in union organizing efforts. I'm talking about the United Auto Workers who went on strike at John Deere in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas to protest against massive cutbacks to retirement benefits and totally inadequate pay raises. I'm talking about the United Steelworkers who went on strike at Special Metals in West Virginia, a company owned by Warren Buffett, worth $127 billion, and they were on strike to fight for decent wages and decent benefits. I'm talking about bakery workers in California who went on strike. I'm talking about bakery workers who went on strike at Kellogg's, Nabisco, and the John Donaire Ice Cream Cake Factory in California, fighting for justice, dignity, and respect. I'm talking about the United Mine Workers who are still on strike at Warrior Met in Alabama, a company owned by BlackRock, the largest Wall Street investment firm in this country, managing $10 trillion in assets. I'm talking about the United Food and Commercial Workers who went on strike at the King Soopers grocery store chain owned by Kroger's in Colorado. And I'm talking about graduate students and adjunct professors at MIT who are waging a strong union organizing effort on that campus. Today, I want to continue to express my support and admiration for these workers who are not only organizing for themselves and for their co-workers, but in fact are organizing for all of us. Because when you have a strong union movement in this country, you stand the possibility of having a strong middle class. Madam President, while we may not hear much talk about the struggles of the working class and communities all across this country, what we should be clear is that these struggles are real and are gaining momentum. The union struggles that we are witnessing have taken place against corporate greed, which determine whether or not workers in our country have decent wages, decent benefits, and decent working conditions. And it really is, I have to say, a bit obscene to take a look at these companies owned by some of the wealthiest people in this country who are becoming much, much richer, and all the while they're trying to lower wages and take back benefits. It really is absolutely disgraceful. So, Madam President, as a strong defender of the trade union movement, what I understand is that when unionized workers do well in raising the bar for economic and social justice, we all do well. Their success is our shared success. And as I said a moment ago, make no mistake about it, we will never have a strong middle class in this country, with decent wages and decent benefits, where workers can afford to pay the rent and send their kids to college and take a few weeks off, paid vacation. That is not going to happen unless and until we have a strong labor movement in this country. Madam President, this is the bottom line. In the year 2022, the United States, and in fact the rest of the world, face two very distinct political paths. On one hand, there is a growing movement toward oligarchy, in which a small number of incredibly wealthy and powerful billionaires own and control a very significant part of the economy and exert enormous influence over the political life of our country. And that is precisely what we are seeing today. Rich get richer, and with their wealth, they buy and sell politicians, put huge amounts of money into the political process, huge amount of money into lobbying, huge amounts of money into TV ads and other ways to influence people. So that is the one direction that this country can continue to move in. But there is another direction, and that other direction is opposition to oligarchy and corporate greed, and it is the creation of a movement of working people and young people who are today in ever-increasing numbers fighting for justice, economic justice, racial justice, social justice, environmental justice. And they are fighting for justice in a way that we have not seen in years. And it is that growing trade union movement that makes me so very hopeful for the future of this country. And it is a movement that I hope all of us will strongly support. Thank you, Madam President, and with that, I yield the floor.